I don't think the people of Israel came back to life after 2,000 years to create an apartheid state. I don't think we came
Do
back
you think
to.
it's apartheid now
I think there are things that smell like apartheid. If it's not apartheid,
around here?
yeah, meaning that for me, it's not about this reason or that reason why it is or isn't apartheid. For me, if it's even confusable with apartheid, we're doing something wrong. Like that's a problem for me. That if it even could be argued that this is that we're doing something like deeply wrong, then we should be asking ourselves what needs to be fixed and
Do
how
you,
do we fix it.
do you have Palestinian friends?
Yeah, sure, of course.
And do they?
I've been involved in peace work since about 2009.
But you're an extremist.
Sure, but our peace work is all about empowering the extremists to make peace.
On both sides.
Yeah, those fully living their people's story, like those like Jews in Hebron with Palestinians in Hebron, Jews in Yitzhar with Palestinians in Balata, like those fully living our people's stories, who are willing to fight and kill for what we believe to be important to us, actually understanding the story of the other, the narrative of the other, the identity of the other without fear. Because right now, to even look at the story of the other is considered a sign of weakness or betrayal on both sides. So we're not even fighting each other, we're fighting our fantasies of each other.
So we're now heading into one of the most contested territories on this planet to find out from the controversial Jewish Israeli settlers how they feel about the Israeli election results.
This is north of Jerusalem. We're deep in the West Bank. This is northern Judea. In fact, Har Bal Chatzor, it's actually the border between Judea and Samaria. On the other side of that big mountain there is Samaria. This is Judea still, northern Judea. I'm not a fan of this fence. I wish it wasn't here, and then you'd have a clearer view. And
So why is the fence here?
the fence is here because I guess some people are afraid
Of what?
of Palestinians.
What would you answer to the world
Yeah.
that calls you an extremist just for simply living here?
Okay, I'm okay with being an extremist.
How many bedrooms is it?
Well, there's two that come with the actual caravan, and we added a third. Well, we didn't add. Somebody before us added a third.
So you got 3 bedrooms, 7 children, so 9 of you.
And just one wife.
So,
Just one wife.
so that's 9 people in 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, we're not all here at the same time because my kids range from 3 to 17. We're here because after thousands of years of living displaced from here, we managed to come back against all odds, and we don't plan to go anywhere else. And the question is, can we make it work? Can we make it work with the other people who are here? Because I think that's important, and I think that's an important next step in our own national development, figuring out a way to live here together with the other peoples of this land in a way that's good for us and good for them. How can we actually really create a society here that's an expression of our values and our identity? I think that's also important. Because that's I think one of the things that's really come to the foreground in these recent election results. You know, what does this actually mean in terms of the national development of the Jewish people in our land? The problem right now is that until now, the frictions in Israeli society have been between Jewish particularism, like a very particularist Jewish nationalism, and Western universalism. And now that the forces of Jewish particularism seem to be becoming stronger against the forces of Western liberalism, we need to actually dig deeper into our identity to find real Jewish universalism, Hebrew universalism, that could actually compete with Western universalism on its own ideological turf. And that's going to be the challenge for a lot of the people who were elected last week, right? Not just continuing with their kind of like narrow, like Jewish particularist aspirations, but thinking about, but actually forcing them, like to think about minority rights, LGBTQ rights in our society, the rights or status of people who identify as Jews but aren't Jews according to how we've defined that for thousands of years. You know, African asylum seekers. Like, we need those who are deeply connected to our identity, to our Torah, to our mission and history, to our land, to find solutions to some of these challenges that are not coming from liberal Western ideology, but coming from Jewish ideology, that could actually present alternatives, not just for us, but for the rest of humanity. Because clearly those models aren't working not just for us, but for anybody today.
So like a lot of people in Tel Aviv, when I was talking to them,
Right.
their fear was, for example, Shabbat, being open on Shabbat. So how do you actually see...
Well, I think Shabbat really needs to be understood as an issue of workers' rights. Meaning the people who want Shabbat to be open to the public, who want buses on Shabbat, who want shopping malls to be open on Shabbat, are usually people who are comfortable enough financially to make that their concern, but they want the bus driver and the people working retail to have to work on the one day that their kids are home from school. Meaning Shabbat is a class issue. It was always a class issue since the time we came out of Egypt, right? And it's one of the things we gave to the world. We gave the concept of a weekend to the world, right? That was one of the contributions we made once upon a time when we had power. Every time the Jewish people have had power in history, we've actually given something to the rest of humanity. This time should be no different.
So you do think that the religious bloc, that they do want to, I guess, impose that on
I don't
Tel
know.
Aviv?
I don't know if they want to impose that. I think ultimately Israeli society is comprised of different tribes.
Yeah.
Okay, Tel Aviv is a tribe. No, but here's the problem: that tribe has had power for the last
Yes.
few decades, and has had power over all the other tribes, and has said, okay, each tribe can do its own thing as long as we all conform to the overall ideological paradigm of Tel Aviv. As long as you fit in with that, you don't conflict with that, you don't have contradictions with that paradigm, which is essentially the paradigm of Western liberalism, then you're fine. Now, I don't think Tel Aviv should be in the driver's seat. But Tel Aviv should be a tribe, just like everybody else. I think if we're going to remain a democracy, if we're going to remain a democratic society, and we look at the socio-cultural and socio-political trajectory of Israeli society, we'll see that this is not really going to be an outpost of Western civilization, that this is going to be something else, that Am Yisrael came back to life to be something else. And in many ways, we really do have a lot more in common with our neighbors, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should actually embrace that. And because it's specifically those of us who are really able to be ourselves, to understand what it means to be us, that can have an easier time reconciling with a lot of our neighbors than those of us who are really just trying to be, as Ehud Barak said, a villa in the jungle, or an outpost of Western civilization in an otherwise savage region. As long as we have that mentality, which is a colonialist mentality, we're never going to be able to resolve our contradictions with our neighbors. And I'm not claiming that the specific individuals who got elected last week are the figures who are going to figure all this out. But I think the ascendance of that sector of Israeli society, those who are really deeply connected to our roots, those who are really deeply connected to our Torah, those who are really deeply connected to our history, to our meta-narrative, to the way we've seen ourselves for thousands of years, are those who should be digging deeper into our identity to actually find a universal vision, universal solutions to all of the issues that people in Tel Aviv are afraid of. And they're right to be afraid of those things. We have to address those fears. I think we get into trouble when we try to apply Western political framings to Israeli society, whether we're talking about religious and secular, whether we're talking about right and left, whether we're talking about liberal and conservative. Those are all categories that grew out of the development of Western civilization and are very relevant to Western civilization. Greco-Roman philosophy, Enlightenment thinking, the revolutionary transition from feudalism to capitalism, like all of those, Christian dogma, all of those categories grew out of the development of that civilization and have very little to do with us. Like, we are a civilization probably more similar to the Aztecs than to anyone else I could think of right now, meaning we have a spiritual component, a legal component, our identity has a territorial component, a national component, but we're more than the sum of those parts. And I think when we reduce our identity to a religious identity, or any of the other identities, we're not being honest about who we are, and we're not really finding solutions to our problems. I don't think that, and I don't even know if Ben Gvir or Smotrich or any of these guys think that anybody should be imposing coercing the behavior of individuals, like what's in their refrigerator, or et cetera, But I think we also have to understand that a lot of what we misidentify as our religion is actually the culture and identity of our people, our folkways. There are things that are just like part of our indigenous culture. And I think the type of people who were elected, even though they might not know this language, because this is a language that doesn't exist so much in Hebrew, and it's also a language that doesn't exist so much in the circles they travel in, I think what's really going on from the perspective of what is often seen as the more like national, tribal, camps in Israeli society is a war between an indigenous people's authentic culture and the forces of westernization and cultural imperialism.
What would you say to those in Tel Aviv that are scared, that are scared of this?
Work with us, help us find real solutions to these issues that are not. The problem is, and this is not just true for our society. This is true for any society in the global South, other societies in this region, Africa, etc. When you try to push the Western framings, whether we're talking like if it's LGBTQ issues or anything else, when you try to push it according to the way, like the it's understood in the West, and you push it aggressively and against the will of the people, it's perceived as an attack on their culture, and that usually leads to a backlash that's dangerous for LGBTQ people. Meaning we've had stabbings, like fatal stabbings at our pride parades. Why? Because people here feel genuinely threatened. They feel like their identity is being threatened, the identity of Jerusalem is being threatened, and they'll fight because those are things that are important to us.
In this kind of community, is those stabbings that you're talking about, is that condemned?
Yeah, I think so.
Would you condemn it?
Yes, I'd condemn it, but I understand where it comes from. Meaning, of course, I condemn it.
But isn't that the same like what the Palestinians say, like a terrorist comes and stabs a soldier at a checkpoint or even an innocent civilian, and they say, yeah, I condemn it, but I understand where it's coming from. Are you the same? Do you see that?
Yeah, I understand that too, of course.
You're applying the same,
Yeah, and I think they're saying something true. I think, in theory, you're talking about a person who condemns it, but I could definitely understand
where the Palestinian also...
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves. These are all Palestinian communities except for Ofra over there.
And why do you say you're happy to be called an extremist?
Well, because I understand that when most people say extremist, they mean somebody who's standing in the way of imperialist agendas. Even if you look at the non-Jewish countries in this region, what makes a country an extremist country versus a moderate country? Is Saudi Arabia more moderate than Iran? No, it's the people who are making money with the American establishment and the people who are not making money with the American establishment. If I'm standing in the way of U.S. and European Mideast policy because I'm living in a place they want Israel to give away, if that makes me an extremist, I'm an extremist.
Well, they would say that it's because you're stopping the Palestinians.
No, I actually want to live with the Palestinians. I actually think that ultimately, again, we can't do this tomorrow, but I think ultimately the only solution that's going to be able to work here is a single state from the river to the sea, including Gaza, that's deeply Jewish, gets softly Jewish, so non-Jews don't even notice it's Jewish, and they just experience a democratic society where they're fully included.
Democratic society means they get a full equal rights to vote. Everything.
Yeah, although I prefer participatory democracy to representative democracy. So voting is, if we're voting, they should be voting, but I think that they're more democratic models.
They will have the same rights as a Jew.
Yeah, and I think...
But how does it remain a Jewish state then?
Right, because right now we're defining Jewish state. Like, we basically look at the state of Israel as a European-style nation-state with Jewish decorations. And those Jewish decorations are not Jewish enough for Jews like me, Jews like the Haredim, and it's too Jewish for the non-Jews, for the Palestinians, the asylum seekers, sometimes Jerusalem, etc.
So how would you say?
So I want to make the Jewish character of the state not hard and shallow, but deep and soft. And meaning that somebody with a Jewish education who knows our identity, who knows our culture, who will see the Jewishness permeating Israeli society because they're just familiar with, oh, that's Jewish. Oh, yeah, that's in the Gemara. Oh, yeah, that's in the Mishnah. And somebody who's not Jewish will just experience a democratic society where they're fully equal.
If you enjoyed this report, make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, share it far and wide. Let the world know the other side of the story from here in Judea and Samaria. And then, if you like our reporting, make sure to head over to bibireturns.com and help fund what we're doing here, because we are 100% viewer funded. We rely on you, not the state and not big business, you, to make sure we can tell the other side of the story from here in Israel. bibireturns.com.